Thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. On the day when we heard of some significant violence in the Ewutu Senya East constituency, it's just up to have a discussion about the voter registration exercise so far, assessing where we are as it enters final stages of this particular exercise. And so we're going to look at the voter registration blues, the violence and the numbers. The events of today has cast a shadow, but it's been coming for a while. This possibly is the most significant incident so far, as has been recorded in the last few days since the registration itself started. We saw gunshots, 2 motorbikes burned, general chaos that disrupted registration at the center in the Ewutu Senya East constituency today. Now, what made it very interesting is that the EC officials on site had to flee for their lives. It meant the people in this particular center could not register for the rest of the day. That is pretty significant in that part of the central region. Now, the Minister for Special Development Initiative, and I guess this is what had made it pretty high profile, an MP for the area has admitted she fired the gunshots. We will bring you a bit more detail about this. As you can see, she is the individual you see with her back to the camera, wearing the jeans and the white top. And this particular incident is her and the NDC candidate for the area almost at blows. And as you can see, she's been led away from the NDC candidate in the area by armed police officers. Eventually, military men had to be called in to deal with the situation. You see the NDC candidate is in red top on the other side, and they nearly came to blows at this particular registration center. This was today, and this particular picture, the pictures you're watching, all unfolded after the gunshots, after the burning of the 3 motorbikes had happened at the police at the registration center in that particular part of the central region. I want to quickly go on to what we know. The minister, as you've just been watching there, and the NDC candidate there is called Phyllis Nakoyo. She was in the red on the other side, nearly clashing with the minister in the video that we just watched there. Now, we know now from the police accounts that 4 people have been arrested and a pistol have now been retrieved. The police tell us that they had to pursue individuals who were in a van, fleeing the scene. They intercepted them and they arrested 4 of them and retrieved the gun. The 4 have now been transferred to the Central Regional Police Headquarters, where they have been detained. We'll keep a close eye on this. Now, this is not the only incident that we've recorded since the registration started on the 30th of June. We've had similar incidents recorded in the Savannah, the Oti, Volta regions, the Bono, where 1 person was confirmed dead. The Peace Council had been there to try and find out what happened, because tensions were building in that part of the country as well, in the Bono region, where 1 person is dead. So that is a story with the violence. But let's now also come to the numbers, because this is absolutely important. As we assess the entire process so far, the numbers tell a very interesting story. Before I even go into these numbers, just remember, just before the registration started, the heat that it generated, the controversy, and the threats of mayhem if the registration goes ahead. It was as if once it started, we're going to have the entire country set ablaze. But the figures are telling us a pretty interesting story. Now, I want you to pay attention to this particular figure here. This is 7.2 million, to be pretty precise, 7,279,237 people have been registered so far by the Electoral Commission. Now, this figure is very significant, because at the time when the registration was about starting, and this is just for 16 days, okay, so between day 1 and the day 16, the EC have registered 7.2 million people. And as you can see, the national spread tells a story. You see the Greater Accra having 1.5 million people, significantly huge numbers. Ashanti region, 1.3 million. And so if you look at the voter population in these two areas, it tells quite a significant story. The Volta OT regions, and I'm saying Volta and OT because it's pretty one of those areas that came in for some tension as well because of deployment of military there, and NDC had concerns over. But if you break this down a bit more, the total number of people registered so far, if you break that number down a bit more, it tells you that what was the fuss really all about? If in 16 days the EC could register 7.2 million, what is the fuss all about? Now let's bring the next slide. And the next slide tells a story. So if 7.2 million have been registered in 16 days, it gives a daily average of 454,952 voters registered every day. That is significant. And the high numbers of people who are showing up at the registration centers is actually very interesting. Because remember that we are doing this registration in the midst of COVID-19. And before the registration started, many people, including myself, thought COVID-19 was going to have a significant impact on turnout at the registration centers. But if you look at the numbers recorded a day in terms of people queuing to register and actually being registered on a daily basis, 454,952 people registered every day using the 16-day figures that the Electoral Commission gave us. That is significant. Now, the total number of days that the EC is hoping to use in this period, from the 30th of June to the 6th of August, it comes down to 38 days. Now, if you do the maths, you are getting 7.2 million people registered by the end of the 38 days. That is, if you're using the daily average of 454,000 times 38, we are getting 17.2 million people registered. Remember that the EC's target is 16 million people. EC itself, before it started, is targeting to register 16 million people by the end of the 6th of August. But at this rate, at this daily rate, they will be exceeding this number by quite a significant margin. I mean, so it begs the question, what was the fuss all about? The registration equipment, the biometric devices, etc., that were purchased, we had concerns about it not being efficient, possibly, concerns about the software. But if they are registering this number, that's going to prove that the figures, the equipment that have been purchased, indeed is working. We will get some perspective and reactions to these figures once my guest join me, because it tells a very interesting story. I want to quickly look at another picture here. And this picture, this graph also shows you a different story, doesn't it? Because if you look at, this is the 2020 voter registration proof of eligibility. 63.8% of people who have turned up to register at the many registration centers use the Ghana card as a base document to register. 63.8%. Now, the reason why that is interesting is before the registration, we were told, and the major controversy revolved around whether we had enough people with voter registration card, Ghana cards to get onto the register. But clearly from what you're watching, at least from the first 16 days, overwhelming majority are getting onto the register using the Ghana card. The guarantor system, by the way, which was also one that civil society and others opposed. I remember doing a show here where CDD raised concerns with the guarantor system. It's following up in second place with 34.4%, really. And the passport, and I think this was expected. Passport, many people in Ghana do not have passports. That was the main concern, that it's going to disenfranchise people if you don't add the voter ID card as part of it. It went to the court, it had been dismissed, but as we see here, Ghana card is leading. Majority, overwhelming, 63% are having the Ghana card and are using it as a basis to register. That in itself is an interesting story. What does it say? But then it begs the question, what will happen in the next 22 days will also tell a very interesting story, because that is a chunk of the days still to come. And so maybe this is too early to call, and the next 22 days will be quite instrumental in trying to see what the picture is by the time they are ending. But last graph I want to show you before we get into the conversation is the figures here about the challenge, the persons who have been challenged. And this system is where you believe that somebody isn't qualified to register to vote, and then you challenge it. It could be the person may be a minor, or the person may be a non-Ghanaian. And as you can see, there are 4 regions stopping this. The region with the highest challenge is the Eastern region, with 2,766 challenge so far in the process. Now, followed by the Greater Accra region with 2,000. Now, the story here that I want you to pay attention to is, you are probably expecting a place like the Volta region to be a place with quite a number of challenges because of the controversy around that we saw before the election, before the registration began, that people may be coming in from Togo and other places into the Volta region to register. And so the parties were very vigilant, MPP in particular raising concerns about that. But it's not really the place, the region with the highest number of challenges, as we've seen in the graphs that the Electoral Commission itself has provided. It's the 3rd in the list. Ashanti region also, which happens to be the stronghold of the NPP, is actually 3rd. It's 3rd. The Volta region is 4th. The Ashanti region is 3rd. So those 2 regions, very interesting regions for both the NDC and the NPP, and the regions leading in terms of challenges. And so again, that tells an interesting story. Eastern region is a stronghold of the NPP, by the way. Greater Accra region is a swing region, and so you can't really tell what's happening in Greater Accra region. If you win it, you win the elections. And as you can see, maybe that is why the Greater Accra is leading, because everybody knows if you don't get vigilant in Accra and challenge as much as possible, and you sleep on the job, it will bite you in the elections. Because if you win Greater Accra, as the history has told us, you win the elections. But look at here, look here. The total number of everything I'm saying in terms of people who have been challenged is 13,801. The percentage tells a big story, 0.2%. I mean, of the total number of people registered in the 16 days, only 0.2% have been challenged. That tells a story about, well, maybe the system really is working. The guarantor system is working efficiently, and the controversy really maybe have been blown out of proportion. I want to quickly bring in my guests who are joining me tonight as we look at these numbers and what has happened today in the Owutu Senya East constituency and the violence. Joining me is the NDC's Director of Elections, Mr. Elvis Ifriankra, joining me right now via Zoom. Also joining me tonight is the NPP's Director of Elections as well, Mr. Evans Nemako, is also joining me via Zoom. We'll also have joining me tonight is Kwesi Ening, Professor Kwesi Ening, who is the security expert and the Director of Academic Affairs and Research at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Is also my guest on the show tonight. And of course, Rhoda Osei is the project manager at the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers. Gentlemen and lady, I'm grateful that you could join me. I want to get your quick reactions to what happened today in Owutu Senya East. I want to start with you, Mr. Elvis Ifriankra. But before I get to you, I wanted to listen very briefly to Madam Hawa Kumsin and her admitting that indeed she fired the warning shot. Watch.
Yes, started registration. Ufaha na ode mema any moto no mushia wa ha. I mean there's so be ama me ma kwemu nti na nya masem. Na last week Thursday na me call self to Christ. Me call ya no. Na me call to say. Na me bi wo ho mo no friend say mama, I me dey say wa ba. Na ma me wona ma na me wa send ya me bo wa man. Ti ma me say me number ade tinye Friday me no ka tell me say the amount for free dynasty at the back inside there. I want a school, and you see a science school. 85 years now, in around. Naja, party they see a break here, na manko. Na chunu no hormone, and information say, you say what time again, and cophobia, in Sawam, Abba. Now, no, I am Mr. Sanko for people, my east, and Sawam, any other area. Have your mobile register. Now, they are all kind of society. And why am I strong? I mean, they are 12 of my news order. 82 2 times am I MP now. 80, we see information. I'm afraid I need to claim. Need to be international. Now, young Kofa will be MP baby, my mama register will come. Now, about to like, will be my 12 about my car. Me sorry call polling center ho. And no na jono me ne manager kasai. And yes okay, e be ko. Na ye ne papa na ko kasa nti e ko du ye. Na me manager ko edu dida.
Eti honorable meba se be na eja ye bobo ne tewtew no abra wo ko no wo de mema kan ho ko e.
Oh. Na sa anye ye kwa me so me na me ne mema na ye adwuma. Politics dey say me ne man kwan to me ye adwuma me nua bema. Mema na
no omukwae no no omukura tuo ene di wachi
meba ma bia ni wa okura tuo di machi
omo na omukwae no obi ankura weapon bia eti etuo ne kasa e no na bo efi he
aya mi ana me ma warning shot
wan kasa wo MP no na ukura tuo be ne kita o
mpato mi ntumi nkyere
wonim tuo no
ana so obi sa say ba ne send ma warning shot
o dabi meba no so am pese me hu etuo kro na kita o no adaroma
me nkyere we tuo kro
honorable na say wo as an honorable member of parliament you think say ukura tuo wonim tuo kro na wo to ana
ada it means to be protect me ho
o bet me protect but also hu tuo no because hu asem ba wo be ya no by all means ana
o say dey
me say etuo no o ekitao ebi ya license ya license ya
me protect wa me license
aha ite e dey etuo wa license dey onim tuo kro ntina me bi say etuo ben ya
ana me ka to say me mbo mi tuo ni din jobe ta to say my license ni tuo
na say wo ko eye center ho no aboa wo ho dada sa na mpese mi hu
ma aboa me hu okwan na so me a member of parliament ofa eti me na say me kuta ma put ma dia me dey because we ni mo bi obekia ana me yo banti.
So that is Madam Hawakunsun. Mr. Wisifiri Ankara, your reaction to that?
Thank you very much, Evans, and good evening to my fellow panelists and good evening to our listeners. Evans, I'm just in a bit of a shock with your introductory remarks. You've just shown us a video of violence, of gunshots being fired at registration centers. And you're saying that perhaps all the concerns that we raised were much ado about nothing. These were some of the things, every single thing that is happening today, we predicted it. And I can give you a catalog of various incidents of violence that has been going on since this registration started. These are not normal times. Indeed, Kasua in particular has become like a war zone. This is about the 5th time that there's been gunfire. We have videos of situations where they almost burned the house of our parliamentary candidates. So in the midst of all this, are you aware, you even said it, that a young man who has just finished teacher training college or is still in the training college has lost his life. If that gentleman were to be your brother, will you say that the concerns that were raised, that we didn't have to go through all the stress, were much ado about nothing? So I think that it's important that we realize that the things that are going on are not normal, and it's a shame, it's a disgrace. And all these things are happening because these things started when the MPP government took power. When they beat up Nanka Bruce, what happened at the Flagstaff House? They beat up MPP's Ashanti Regional Security Officer, dragged them from the office. We saw it on video. What happened? They subsequently were taken to court. They went into the court and traumatized a pregnant woman. What happened? Nothing happened to them. Then Ayawaso West Wagon came. That was the time that I knew that our democracy was under threat. commission was set up. Nothing came out of that. The people told us in our faces that this is a dress rehearsal, and indeed we're going to see more of those things in 2020. This is not what we are seeing. I can give you a catalog of violent incidents all over as we proceed, all over the country. It's as if we're in a state of war. Military people all over the place. These young men wearing black T-shirts and wearing camouflage and then wearing masks as registration centers. Why? Are we in a state of war? And you're telling me this is normal and it's much ado about nothing? No. It started as a trickle. People were not disciplined. People were not sanctioned. No action was taken. And if it continues like this, I fear for what will happen on December 7th. So those are my initial comments.
And the specific case of Madam Hawa Kumsi?
I think it's very responsible. She went there firing guns. So the previous days, and I said there's been more than 5 incidents of gunshots. So in those instances too, was she the one who fired those shots? It's a culture, it's a subculture that the MPP and their appointees have adopted. They move in there with all these tags, these invincible forces that they claim they have disbanded. They've passed the vigilantism law, which is just a mere sheet of paper. They are not setting any good example. And they move to these polling stations, brutalizing people. I said, I can give you copious examples. So she's just following the example that has been set all over the place. It's a disgrace. It's a disaster. Look at that. A whole member of parliament. I took my gun and I fired warning shots. So where were the police? So now, as ordinary citizens, we should all go and look for guns. Is this where we are heading to? Because that's what she's saying. So we should all go and look for guns. Dr. Enin, show us where the guns are, so that we should all go and look for guns, so that when we are going to polling stations to go and register or cast our vote, we should be holding guns, so that in case anybody attacks us, we will take our guns and fire warning shots. Is this democracy? Sometimes it's as if I'm dreaming. Is this Ghana? The democracy that went through a transition 1992, we had a power turnover to 2000. We started consolidation. The MPP lost, handed over to 2016. We had become a beacon of hope in this troubled sub-region. Look at what is happening now. We've gone back 10, 15 years.
Let me bring in
the fault of President Akufo-Addo and his MPP government.
Let me bring in your colleague, election director of elections with the MPP, Mr. Evans. Mr. Nemako, so as you watch these videos play out, what's your reaction to your candidate and minister, in your government, MPP colleague, who says, I fired a warning shot at a registration center?
Thank you, Evans. And let me greet our viewers as well as panelists on this show. I think that from the way Mr. Friye is talking, and I'm not too surprised. And as you said as part of your intro, before the registration exercise, as late as December, Mr. Friye is on record to have said that the NDC must bring Ghana into a standstill. Has he forgotten? And he's here today that somebody's action is irresponsible. I will leave that to the judgment of viewers.
No, but you think Hawa Kumsin's actions? You think Hawa Kumsin's action is responsible?
What I'm saying is that the MP minister has been candid that he shot a gun, and I think that at this stage the police service will take action and properly investigate whatever happened at the registration center.
Mr. Nemako, do you endorse the firing? Do you endorse the firing of gunshots at the registration center?
I heard Madam Phyllis and the kind of unprintable words she used on the MP, and I'm saying that I've only gotten snipers of development that happened. I'm waiting to receive full report from our central regional leadership, and the party will take it up. But
okay, I mean, just before, I'm just wondering,
taking charge of the situation.
Yeah,
and it is not us. Mr. Efi Yankra is preaching.
Okay, but Mr.
issue.
Madam Hawa Kumsing, just a second.
From day one,
Madam Hawa Kumsing confesses.
Mr. Efi Yankra has
Madam Hawakum Singh confesses,
never said anything positive about this whole registration exercise from day one.
Okay.
And I don't know what his problem really is.
Mr. Nemako, if you may, I mean, just if you may, you signed a code, in fact, a roadmap under the Peace Council's, facilitation, which says when stuff like this happens, when a minister is admitting that I fired shots, the party's leadership must condemn it. You're saying tonight that although you've heard her speak and admit that she did it at the registration center, you are not prepared to condemn it because what? You're waiting for what else?
I said that I'm happy that the police service has taken charge of the issue. I'm told that it's been reported and the regional police command has taken charge of it. The proper investigations will be done, and then the corporate will face the.
But are you prepared to publicly condemn the actions of firing a shot at the registration center that she's admitted to?
Evans, you heard the woman. I'm saying that she's been very candid. She said that she had gone to the station with his campaign team and were faced by the candidate of the NDC who had gone there with other men, with metro men on motorbikes. Why were they there with motorbikes? I mean, this is not issue of violence because violence. It's an issue of ensuring that the police service are made to take charge of the whole registration process. It's an issue of people going to register. Why go there with motorbikes and metro men? For what?
Okay.
I don't think this is the way to go.
Stay with me, Mr. Nemako.
Ankra has continuously said difficult things about this whole registration exercise.
Stay with me. We'll talk about the registration exercise soon. Professor Ainin, your reaction.
We are talking about registration exercise.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in detail. Just hold on for me a minute. Professor Ainin, your reaction to the minister admitting that she fired a shot.
Well, I think it's very disturbing. It's unacceptable. It's premeditated. And in her own words, when she heard instances of supposed violence, she stated clearly, Onyema Sema, that is not my business. So, to get reports from individuals, to leave her house and arm herself, supposedly with a registered weapon. Probably she's been taught how to fire in a crowded area. And to behave in that manner is putting life at risk. The dismissiveness about the gun type, and then her statement about the licensing raises a lot of concerns. And I think both Mr. Nimako and my colleague, Mr. Ankra, have made their positions clear. But you see, politics is about serving the people of this country and creating an enabling environment in which development, stability, and peace allows us to perform. So it's up to the Inspector General of Police to handle this case. But it goes beyond the police service. This is our political culture. And it is my hope that His Excellency the President will ask Mrs. Hawakum Singh to step aside by tomorrow afternoon, or probably dismiss her, because her behavior, although Mr. Nimako tells us she's been candid, yes, she's been candid because she can't lie about what she has done. You know, the only saving grace for her, if she is sacked, as I'm hoping Occupy Ghana and other people will raise their voices about, then of course, being candid and saying, look, I did what I did, is her only option left. But this also speaks to the easy availability of guns in this country. Our willingness to very quickly resort to violence. Violence has almost become like a currency. The more violent you are, either in actually perpetrating acts of violence or threatening to be violent, then people actually look up to you. And one would have thought that as a substantive minister in a government that seeks to bring the issue of vigilantism to book, having spent substantial government funds and then donor funds to develop a code of conduct, a roadmap, and for a minister to behave like any other vigilante, I think raises very disturbing, concerns. And I'm happy at least Mr. Nimako recognizes, the seriousness of the situation. But the Central Regional team must act with speed, because in any other jurisdiction, Mrs. Sawakumsin would have been sacked already, or certainly she would have given a statement to the police. And I'm hoping, Evans, during this program, we should be able to tell the people of Ghana, has she given a statement? Has she been invited? 4 people have been arrested. A pistol has been seized. Is that the pistol that she used? So it raises very fundamental questions. And because we need to send a clear signal, similar to what happened to Carlos, I think, is it Ankara or Ankara? We need to send a signal that says certain behaviors by people in public office cannot and must not be accepted. This behavior is not just about an individual in a political party. It goes to speak to Ghana's reputation as a country that is governed by the rule of law, where there's tolerance, where ordinary people feel secure, and where the rules around access to and usage of guns are governed also by law. Hawa Kumsin has done her party a great disservice, her constituency a great disservice, and certainly the good people of this Ghana a very great disservice. Yeah, this is a bad day for politics in this country.
And Professor Eneng, you raised a question about the police. They issued a statement. The statement talks about the 4 that have been arrested, the pistol that has been retrieved, says nothing about Hawa Kumsin's point that she fired the shots there. And it just raises the question that you raised yourself about whether she's a person of interest in investigations. The police have issued a statement. They mentioned nothing of her involvement. I want to bring in Rhoda Osei. He's a project manager at Coalition of Domestic Election Observers. Rhoda, you've been doing some monitoring, and I know that from your initial monitoring, you've also found evidence of violence and disturbance at many registration centers across the country. This is just one, I guess, of many that your people have picked up on, correct?
Sure, Evans. First of all, let me say that it's quite disturbing and very unfortunate that registration exercises over the years, the history of registration exercises has always been characterized with pockets of violence. We always say these are isolated cases, but you never know when situations can degenerate. We have Professor Eneng here, maybe he can help us here. But with tension and conflict, you never know, with violence, you never know when situations can degenerate. So even though we always say these are isolated cases, these are just pockets of violence, it's important that we keep these developments in check, because at some point in time, this can become a bigger problem for us. Now, the point I want to make is that it's quite unfortunate that some of the root of these issues is just because people don't want to respect the electoral rules and regulations. Whatever concerns people have, the registration processes have been designed in a way that allow people to channel their concerns. First of all, political parties have their representatives at various registration centers. So if people believe that ineligible people are coming to register, there's a right channel for these concerns to be passed through. You can pick a registration, a challenge form from the registration officials there. We've heard about people making statements that some of the people who had gone there to register did not reside in the area. The point is that whatever the concern is, whatever the issue is, there's a right mechanism for people to channel their concerns instead of resorting to violence. So this is quite unfortunate. we understand the need for political parties to be vigilant about the process, but at the same time, vigilance must be conducted within the framework of law. So we cannot just resort to all manner of means just because we want to protect our interests. This is quite selfish and very, very much against the interests of the country. And I think we all must condemn this in the highest, in the strongest possible terms. But again, we also want to join the calls from the other panelists that, of course, we need our security agencies to be swift on this. And you made reference to the statement that has just come out and what its content are. We need to know more, because if we will be able to hold this in check, then of course we need to be proactive. We need to see real action being taken against perpetrators of violence. Okay, yeah, thank you, Rhoda. I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, I'll bring in the, we'll try and look at the figures from the registration itself, which has become the grounds and the basis for all the controversy. The EC has been releasing some figures, and of course, I introduced them at the beginning, analyzed them. I'll get Ifeanyi and Mr. Nimako to have a bite at that. I know Ifeanyi disagrees with the questions about what it says about the controversy leading up to it. I'll get him to look at the figures himself and see what that says about the remainder of the registration period. Stay with me. My guest on PM Express tonight is Ifeanyi. He's the Director of Elections for the NDC. Evans Nimako, Director of Elections for the NPP. Professor Kwesi Aining with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. And of course, we're also joined by Rhoda with the CODEO. I want to bring in Mr. Ifeanyi. Mr. Ifeanyi, as I started, I put out the EC's figure that he put out last week at the end of the 16th day. If you look at the figures, 7.2 million people registered in 16 days, on course to exceed their target of 16 million. In fact, they're going to hit, or if you look at the daily average registrations of 454,000, on course to exceed the target by quite a significant margin. A significant percentage of people, more than 60%, are using the Ghana card, which was an issue that I know you had raised before. If you look at all these figures, don't they vindicate the EC's position to go ahead with a voter registration exercise?
Absolutely not. I and my party and all of us who felt that this almost $200 million exercise was unnecessary, we still believe it wasn't necessary. We've lost a life. We've had incidents of violence all over the place. For us to replace this register, the current register or the old register, then with this one costing us almost 200 million, we didn't need it. But here we are. We've taken the decision. The Supreme Court has ruled. And the point is that we have mobilized our people. You see, the NPP were hoping that we will not be able to mobilize and turn out our people in such huge numbers, but they are surprised. We have mobilized our people and they are out there. And wherever you go, you can see that our people are willing and ready to go out there to register. Now, it's important, Evans, you said that the target of the EC is 60 million. It's not correct. The EC in the official press statement a couple of days ago said their target was 15 million. So they never said anywhere that their target was 16 million. And again, even that 15 million or even 16 million, we should ask ourselves, what is the basis? The previous register had about 16.8 million. And so the EC cannot just project a target without any basis. This is science, this is statistics. What usually happens is that you go to the statistical service and then they will give you the projections. If we had a register that had 16.8 million people and you have over the period of 4 years, how many people are 18? So they would then be able to give you the statistical projection. And it's on that basis that you do your projections and your preparations. You recall that when we're going to do the previous limited registration exercise, the EC initially projected 300,000. We asked them the basis, they couldn't explain, they raised it to 500,000. We went to statistical services. Statistical service gave us a figure that it was going to be 1.7 million. Subsequently, they adjusted in the course of the registration to 700,000. Lo and behold, at the end of the day, they registered 1.2 million. They registered 1.2 million because they prepared for less number of people in terms of logistics, in terms of strategy. So it's important that this time around, don't just do projections based on nothing. those projections must be based on the figures and statistics that the Statistical Service has given them. Now, my friend and brother Evans, the MPP guy, they like my name, they throw my name all over the place. But the point is that I took a position and I believe in that position. 1, 2 is the position of my party. 3, that position is the position of 40 civil society organizations, including even Kodeo. That position was the position of the National House of Chiefs. That position was the position of various other institutions, groups, and individuals.
So that you bring Ghana to a standstill.
If all those people were wrong, then good luck to you. All the 40 civil society organizations who are nowhere in any way, shape, or form, can you say that they are aligned to the NDC? They stated clearly, gave their reasons, the financial reasons, the political reasons, the statistical, give all the reasons. Everybody said this was unnecessary. But you insisted because your majority leader said that if you did a new register, there was no way the NDC was going to win any election in Ghana. Well, I have news for you. We are prepared, we have mobilized, we have turned out in our numbers, and that is what is carrying you people, that you are going around bashing people left, right, and center. And it doesn't matter what you do, you are on your way out. Because we are seeing the numbers, funny numbers, in some instances, and I'm sure you've all heard about the incident in
Ashanti region. In Ashanti region, yes. The EC admitted on Friday.
Truth in that.
EC admitted on Friday. No, Mr. Nemako, if you may, I mean, EC on Friday admitted that there were issues with the numbers from the Ashanti region, and that they've had to correct them. And so, yes, indeed, there were issues. In fact, very specifically, in the constituencies that, of course, that had been alerted and raised by the NDC.
Yes, we raised the issue. So I don't know what Evans is talking about. We raised the issues, and indeed they admitted it, and then subsequently they made the corrections. The EC themselves came out to say, well, there were issues, and they explained the issues. We don't agree with the explanation, but the point is that you, MPP, you claim that you are also monitoring, you had your own system of checking. Did you see those numbers? And if you saw them, what did you do about them? Because they favored you, so you were quiet and comfortable. We were not comfortable, so we pointed it out by a letter to the EC, by drawing the EC's attention, and also by putting it in the public domain. And then the corrections have been made. Yeah. We've discovered others, some we are handling quietly because they are not substantive and substantial. But be assured that we've put a system in place where we are monitoring every single thing that happens on a daily basis. On my system, I can see everything by close of day. Whatever happens at every police station registration center, we can see it. And if there is any inflation anywhere or suppression, we will see it and we'll put it out there.
I want to quickly bring in Evans, but on that point of the Ashanti region, it happened in Ofinso North and in Fija Sector. The Electoral Commission held a press conference, admits, yes, there was a problem, that they figured it out. They had acknowledged the NDC protested and has been corrected. But Mr. Nemako, if you look at the numbers, again, by the way, the EC's target, Mr. Bisriankwa is right. Last week, Friday, they put out 15 million. Today, I called the EC before I came on there to check on that target. They said between 15 and 16 million people. And this is according to Mr. Just by way of
update. They are going, you can be sure that by next week the projection will go up. I'm giving you empirical evidence.
I mean,
limited registration.
I hear
300,000.
I hear your point.
500,000. Then 700,000. So ask them, what is the statistical basis?
Yeah,
there has to be a basis. Any taught me this in research.
Yes, I hear your point. I mean, I'm just putting out what the EC told me. I mean, let me bring in Evans Nemako. Mr. Nemako, if you look at the huge number of people being registered on a daily basis and the 7.2 million the first 16 days, NDC has a point, have they not, that this is, nobody anticipated with COVID and all, that people will be dispassionate and go out and register. Some say that is an indication that maybe the electorates are pretty upset and may want to, vote in a certain direction. Do you agree with that analysis?
Well, Evans, I think when we get to December 7, the good people of Ghana will decide the way they want the Ghana to go, under which government they want to see Ghana. And I don't think it's as Mr. Frianka is preaching. This whole issue of a certain projection that it will be 40 million, 50 million, or 60 million, or even 70 million. Is the EC saying that they will not register eligible people? Is that the case? I don't think that is the case. And then the point is, if in the certain limited registration exercise, the NDC projected 1.7 million and the EC was able to register 1.2 million, doesn't mean that some people were denied. Evans, the EC started the registration exercise in a clustered system. They started with 3,457 registration centers in the first batch on phase 1. They moved to the second batch with another 3,323. The third phase, they moved to 6,746. And on the fourth phase, they are doing 6,703 registration centers. So definitely the numbers will go up. But if you've observed, you realize that in the first 3 days of the 6 days of registration, you see more people trooping into the registration centers. The subsequent 3 days ending the 6 days, the numbers go down, and that's what we are observing. Yes, the EC may have given a certain target, 16 million. If you're able to have it, why not? It's good people of Ghana who are eligible. But the NDC protested vehemently against the registration exercise to be conducted by the Electoral Commission, and they failed at court. So, Mr. Frianka, your position has been very clear. But before the commencement of this registration exercise, before Madame Jemensa and Co took over, Madame Charlotte Osei has signed contract with STL to compile a new voters register for Ghana. We were told at IPAC a number of times that there was a problem with the voter management system. And in this era of IT revolution, who doesn't want a perfect system to work out an arrangement that will give us credibility in things we do? So for us as New Patriotic Party, we never objected to it. In fact, when the NDC went to court, most of the position of the Supreme Court was on the Abu Ramadan case 1, 2, and 3. And are they telling us that that was 40?
Yeah.
Yes, that would be their position. But I'm saying that, yes, I don't think that in terms of statistics, we're going to have constant daily or average accordance of people trooping to registration centers, because the numbers of registration centers will vary. They are not the same across. And so, yes, I will wait and see how it turns out. But I want to put it clear here. What the EC told us, and in their publication, when it has to do with Offenso and Kwabri, was that their officers were giving them accumulated figures.
But that led to the high numbers.
That didn't change.
Yeah.
For us, the figures we are picking, Mr. Frianka, perfect your system. Whether you have it daily from Aveno, from Aflao, from Kaukudi, that is your figures. That I'm saying that for us as New Patriotic Party, we are observing keenly of what is happening.
Yeah, I want to bring in Professor Enin, Mr. Evans.
NDC's candidate, before you go, NDC candidate for Cape Coast North,
yes,
gave false information.
But that matter is being dealt with. He's going to appeal, we understand. I mean, on that particular matter. Yeah, let me bring in Professor. Let me bring in Professor Enin. Prof, ask it's become pretty clear. The tensions leading to the December elections pretty much rising. You've written quite extensively about this. What we've seen in the registration centers attest to the fact that something has to happen. I wonder, you were very instrumental in the roadmap to peace that the Peace Council sort of facilitated. With all that we are seeing right now, I wonder what role that particular roadmap should play or is playing in trying to reduce the tensions and get the parties to comply with what they signed on to.
Well, Evans, the Code of Conduct has been signed on to, the roadmap has been agreed to by the two major parties, but we realized a certain weakness in that process. the National Peace Council does not have the capacity to elicit compliance from the two parties. The two parties themselves, by their behavior, have demonstrated a certain disbelief, both in the code of conduct and in the roadmap, because they know that their members and their supporters who commit acts of atrocities and violence will not be punished by the law enforcement agencies and neither by the state of Ghana. And that is why, for me, it is of crucial importance, if the roadmap and the code of conduct should succeed, that Hawa Kumsin is punished. 2, to elicit compliance, the parties must show us that they will abide by the principles inherent in those two documents that they have signed on. And I think having Mr. Nimakun here and Elvis Afriyankra is very crucial, because they can send a signal as to their preparedness to comply. If we don't, then I think it's going to be most unfortunate, because in 2000, 2004, 8, 12, acts of violence and abusive language, and I think that very experienced politicians are here, were episodic. After the inauguration of the president, we saw very episodic acts of violence, abuse, intimidation, seizure of some properties. But in the last, since 2016, they have been constant and they have been rising. Okay? Violence has become, as I've said earlier on, a currency. Members of vigilante groups see it as a business. There is a franchising going on. They are beginning to play law enforcement roles. The police service are afraid of dealing with vigilante groups because individuals will be punished. And over time, there's this culture of impunity that has become an embedded aspect of our politics. Yeah, and that is what we are seeing now.
Yeah, and that clearly is a big issue. And I wonder how the Peace Council is going to approach this going forward. Because I know inbuilt in the particular document is also an avenue to try and reach out to the parties again as things unfold, to try and get them to remind them and nudge them to comply. I want to take another quick break. When I return, I'll hear from Rhoda for her to give me a sense of, as far as CODEO is concerned, and what they're seeing on the ground, and what they anticipate going forward, what the picture is nationally in the next 22 days as the Electoral Commission continues its registration. Stay with me. So on PM Express, I want to get a quick, brief comment on Rhoda. Rhoda, just before we wrap up, I'm just curious to know what the CODEO's independent evaluation of the process so far indicates, very briefly, if you may, because this is very important to hear from an independent view.
All right, thank you very much. First of all, Evans, let me just correct a statement that Mr. Afriyankra made. CODEO was not part of the 40 or so civil society organizations that officially opposed the registration exercise. CODEO did not actually state any official position as far as that issue was concerned. Now, let me just touch a bit on the numbers. Earlier, you made some projections based on what your own in-house you had done, and you were looking at the number of days. Let me say that from what we know so far, the exercise is likely going to extend beyond the originally communicated date of 6th August because of what happened in phase 1, where the Electoral Commission couldn't deploy all the teams that they had planned. And so technically, many of the registration centers that were supposed to fall under phase 2 have had to be moved towards the end of the exercise. So we are now looking towards mid-August, thereabout. And so it means that the number of days is going to increase. And again, just to add on the projections that you were making, it means that if things continue to go as they are, then probably even the projection that you had, we may exceed that. The question that will make some interesting analysis in the end when this is concluded, because if you are looking at, say, 17 million registered population, there have been concerns in earlier times about the the percentage share of our voting population, because if you have, assuming you have, say, 17 million registered population, and you take the estimated population that we have now, which is around 30 million, then you are looking at close to 60% of your population being of voting age. So I think there will be some interesting analysis that we all will have to do when this exercise concludes. But of course, I also know that similar to what Mr. Nimaku was saying, for some of the phases that we are seeing, especially phase 3, the exercise, a lot of people show up in the first few days, first 4 days, and then the remaining 2 days or sometimes 3 days, you don't see as much in terms of the numbers. So just some bit in terms of the numbers issue that you raised. Now, the exercise has gone quite well. That is not to say that there hasn't been challenges. There have been challenges with biometric verification devices. We've reported with even the few registration centers that our teams have been following. In the first phase, for instance, you had close to some 13% or so of centers recording some challenges with biometric verification devices. There have been issues about people's understanding of what the guarantor process is. Can anybody just show up and guarantee for anybody at all? What we've seen is that especially what the political parties and their agents are doing at registration centers is just virtually trying to guarantee for anybody that they think can help their interest. And I think this is something that we need our parties to be a little more cautious. Wow. It's not just anybody that people can guarantee for. When you are guaranteeing or vouching for somebody, you are saying that you are vouching for the eligibility of the person. It's not just by knowing the person's face. So this is something that we want to really throw caution about. There are other issues to do with respect for the rules. Like I said earlier, there are rules about how you can challenge a person. Sometimes this is not done.
Which people are, and I guess,
allow the person to go through the process, and then you challenge the process.
Yeah, and of course, that clearly is what played out at Ewusu Senya East, because the minister thought that somebody had barred people to register. By instead of picking up the reforms to challenge, she went there with a gun, and gunshots were fired. Thank you, gentlemen and lady. I'm grateful that you joined me. We'll return with another assessment as the process continues. As Kodeo says, possibly the time will be extended. My name is Evans. Enjoy the rest of the evening.